welcome back to Call Me By Your Game, the podcast where I, your host, Connor McCabe, bring on a guest to hear from them about a meaningful video game from a particular moment in their life. And on the show, I talk to my guests as much about what made playing that game special and memorable to them as I try to get into the context, the nitty-gritty, if you will, about what painted that experience of that game and what surrounded their life at the time. A little bit of housekeeping up top is that anything that my guest or I share today, whether it's something we're plugging or something that we're just desperately calling you to support, there's going to be links in the show notes. So whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on your favorite podcast catcher, if you scroll down in the episode description, there's going to be links, whether it's to all the social media websites you can follow the podcast out, or our Patreon, where we have our current Games Club series that airs every Friday. We're covering Hollow Knight coming up. I'm really excited. We're actually, when this episode comes out, just in 2 days, our first episode's going to air. And actually, it'll probably be on this feed too. So if you want to sample what our Games Club is like, check out our stuff on Patreon. There's going to be plenty of ways for you to do that, including those links in the show notes. But that'll do it for the housekeeping for the episode. And I'll finally introduce my guest, someone who I do not know at all, and I don't know what he does, but I do know he's here. Please welcome to the microphone, Dennis Curtlett.
Connor! So nice to finally meet you and to be here.
What a gosh darn treat it is, Dennis. You know what I was thinking about earlier? As I was sitting on the toilet about 5 minutes before.
Doing a one or a two?
It was one of the, well, actually, twist. Neither.
Ooh. Okay.
I was sitting down on a closed toilet, I'll say, clipping my fingernails into the trash can, because that's how I do it. I like sit on something and I go over the can so that I catch most of the clippings.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And you're probably wondering, what do I do after that? I do go get the vacuum, Dennis, and I make sure those little guys aren't just out there.
I don't know if people can see this. You have a very clean apartment behind you. Like, it looks very well organized and very clean. So I can imagine that's true.
Yeah, that translates to everything else in my life. Well, so I was on the toilet, clipping my fingernails, and I was thinking about you leading up to this episode. And
on the toilet?
On the toilet. It's actually, I really don't think about you unless I'm sitting down in a shitting position. But Dennis, I remembered a bit came to me that you and I used to do that I totally forgot, that I don't think we brought up in years. And it was this bit we used to do where we used to say, you were me from the future.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember this?
Yes.
Why did we start doing that? I know it was a Buster's era thing, but I do you have any idea why that invaded us?
I don't know specifically, but I will say it probably doesn't play the same way anymore because now we look dramatically different. But I feel like 8 years ago or 7 years ago, however long ago that was, or 10 years ago, I feel like I had a much more clean shaven. I feel like we were closer in appearance.
I think probably we've both gone our separate ways.
Yes. You still look very young, but you looked very young back then. And it was like, oh, I'm you from the future.
Maybe that's probably what it was. Because I think that first year, Dennis, it's come up on the pod. So Dennis, don't worry. We've got Buster's heads listening to the episode right now. Well, you're the sixth of the final. Well, actually, technically, you're the seventh of 9 Busters that are currently, on the newest iteration.
Who are the two that you haven't gotten?
Coil and Tamola.
Wow.
I know. So this is an improv team that Dennis and I were on. It is 7 years ago, Dennis. We were performing in the Inner Sanctum every other week on the mess hall team, put together, UCB minor league team, essentially.
Just me, you, and Kimia.
Just the three of us. Everyone refused to show up. But yeah, I mean, listeners will know past guests of the show. I think most recently, I had on Michaela and Johnny in the same year, but Corey, Mia, and Kimia have also all been on as well. Anyway,
who had the most interesting game? Who's the game that you remember? I mean, Johnny's got a big video game.
He does.
History, so.
Johnny's Forsbein out there will send me just like unsolicited, no context, no caption,
shirtless pics
of himself. And I'm like, Johnny, I already have a treasure trove of these. He'll send me Instagram reels of like retro video game stuff because he knows I'm into that too. And I'll respond to him or I'll ask him a question about it or like be like, "Hey dude, so how was the rest of your day after basketball?" And he'll just say something like, "It was good." And I'm trying to keep the conversation going, but Johnny's just not having it.
Can I tell you that the majority of my long-term friends, like people I was friends with in high school, college, and then or 20s, 30s, like all we do now, we have nothing in common anymore. So all we do is I just have like 20 people who send me Instagram reels just with no like, and then I like them or I write haha.
Yep. Uh-huh. And
That's
that
all my
counts as a
friends throughout
relationship.
time.
Yeah. Some
Yeah.
people do that with TikTok.
Ooh, I don't want to. Great. I don't want it.
It's okay.
But that sounds great.
You don't have to be on it. I'm barely on it. But to answer your question, the most interesting game I think that someone brought on, I would either say would be because the Busters crew has brought on a lot of, I would say, popular games, including the one that we'll have on for the main event later.
What?
I know you're just you're normal. Corey brought on, I think it was Super C, which was like a Contra sequel. I don't know if you know the
Ooh.
Contra games. They were on the original
I,
NES.
I do know Contra. Yes, very
Okay.
well.
Corey did that, but Mia brought on a SpongeBob game. It was SpongeBob SquarePants and Revenge of the Flying Dutchman, I believe. And that was like, it's also not obscure, but I would have never played it. And now I'm kind of interested in it. It's just like a cartoony platformer. So who knows?
Love it.
So anyway, you're my seventh of nine pieces. 10 if you count
I feel
John.
very, very honored.
Huge. Just one by one, I'm getting you all. I mean, we'll kind of go start to get into it finally, but Dennis, I know you through the improv community. I don't remember specifically like the moment we met, but I knew about you before we met because I was following, the grandma crew, Charlie and Stephen Loomis and Svensgaard and Tamola around. I was following them around the indie scene before I was doing indie improv, and you always stuck out as someone to me who I think like the first time I had a conversation with you, I was like, oh, I feel safe around Dennis. Something that no one's ever said before. I was like, oh, I feel safe.
Steak.
Yes. Dennis is engaging with me. He's cool. He's friendly. And I have this memory of being at L's Sid at someone's birthday that I didn't know in like 2016.
Oh
And I
my God.
remember talking to
Keep
you
going.
there.
I think I remember this.
Do you really?
Okay, this is gonna, if I'm off, because I was gonna flip it the other way and say,
Oh, sure.
yes, I remember you originally from you were nice, fun guy who was always at improv parties, but was
Yes.
not an improviser. And then eventually there's a cool moment where all of a sudden it's like, cool, fun guy from improv parties who doesn't do improv. We're now on a team together. And
Yeah.
then watching you climb and climb and climb and climb. It's been very interesting. But that the this is gonna sound crazy, and please destroy this if I'm wrong or
Okay,
if we
I'm
don't want to be
ready.
this specific. I think I was taking a class, and I think it was Sydney Sweeney's birthday party.
Sydney
No, oh my
Steinberg.
God. Oh my God, destroy this. I keep doing that.
I was at
I,
Sydney Sweeney's birthday, but it was totally unrelated. Go ahead.
I was in a class and I think it was Sydney Steinberg's
Okay,
birthday party.
yes.
Because I remember it was at El Cid, which I'd never been to before that time.
Okay.
And it would make sense. But the idea that that is where, wow, weird.
I feel like it's where we had our first like actual conversation, or at least one that I internalized. So whether or not it was the first, but that sounds right. It was. You know what? I'll message Sydney after this and be like, "Hey, Sydney, did you have a birthday at El Cid in 2016?"
Weird. Sorry. I'm sure people say this to you all the time too. Originally, it was always, you said the grandma crew, but I always remember it was always you and Steven.
Yes.
We're just the party guys in a good way, not in like a
Yes.
scary party guys, but like the good time at a party.
Hey, we'll take it. That's great. But I remember, I think after this moment, I started seeing you around more and then I started performing. And then, yeah, we got placed on, as we've been talking about, Busters together. And the rest, Dennis, then the rest is just history. I mean, I've been seeing you around ever since. A little less nowadays because I'm less plugged into the indie improv scene. I can't speak for you though.
I
Feels like
have
you're not as plugged in
oddly,
as you maybe would have been 7 years ago, but I can't tell.
I feel like the indie scene constantly reboots itself like every couple of years.
Yes.
And when pandemic ended, I was like, I don't know anyone anymore. Who are you people? We were still doing the Funk Shuffle show. So it was like, what is going on? We don't know anyone. So truly, me and Michael Gardner from Funk Shuffle took a class over at one of the local, not UCB schools.
Nice.
And it's amazing how much it was fun. It was like a weird nostalgic thing, but also it's weird how much it immediately plugs you back into everything.
That's cool.
Um, I will say I have a friend who just got on Mod, and I was like, "Oh, let me see who's on your team." And it was like the first time that I was like, "There's not a name here that I recognize even a little bit." There
My,
was, can I tell you one thing?
yes, please.
I was at a birthday party and there was, and again, delete this. I was at a birthday party and there was a lot of people, but then there was this guy who I assumed I'd never seen him before. I assumed, oh, he's not an improviser. He must be like a friend from work or something. So I went out of my way to try and like introduce him to people and include him with
Uh-huh.
all the improvisers. I'm like, what a nightmare. And then I went to go see Harold Knight first. I forget who it was for, maybe for David Danella. But I went to Harold Knight, and the first person who came out from behind the curtain was this guy. And I was like, oh, he's on fucking Harold. Okay.
No way. Was it Matt?
I don't remember the name of this person. I will look it up later, but I don't remember. And I don't think he was on David's team, but he was on like one
Okay.
of the teams that played.
Okay. Gotcha. That is so funny. Ah, goodness. Well, outside of improv and how we know each other, Dennis, who are you? What do you want to share with the listener about yourself today?
Just a guy in this room on a Zoom. I don't if you want to check out I'm a filmmaker, screenwriter. If you want to, is this where we do plugs? Do you do plugs this
By all
early?
means,
It's
yeah,
wild.
absolutely.
I I did a low budget, micro budget feature called Paradox Loss. You can watch on Prime if you have Prime for free. You can check that out if you want. Give it a review. That'd be nice. I do a screenwriting workshop online on Zoom. Funk Shuffle Presents is every month at the Clubhouse. Been going for 10 years now.
Dang.
It's an improv show, experimental improv show. Yeah, that's basically it.
I love it. Well, Dennis, wouldn't you believe the
Why do
stuff
we, why do, like to the 300 people listening, are any of you coming to take well, if two
I
of
can
you go and watch the movie, we've won this podcast.
I can hear the Prime subscriptions just getting logged right now. I can hear I can hear the registrations of that screenwriting workshop, Dennis. I can hear it. It's all happening right now.
Absolutely.
Well, good for you.
That's why we do it.
It really is. I'm going to put links in the show notes to everything you just promoted, and we'll plug at the end too. So we'll have you run through that again. Dennis, we're about to get into your history with video games in general, but will you please preview what you've brought on for the main event in the second half later and call me by your game?
You prepped me and I forgot. it's
However you say it is going to work, unless you totally screw it up.
Today for the main event, I have brought you the game Perfect Dark.
That was it. Now, speaking of perfect, Dennis, that was about a 10 out of 10 right there.
Was that correct?
Pretty good. You nailed it. I'm excited to get into it later. This is going to be episode 214 of the podcast. And
That's so nice of you. It's nice to be on the special ones.
yeah, I like to wait for those numbers that we all remember. I guess it's kind of the Valentine's Day episode, 214.
Hell yeah.
Maybe.
February 14th. Hello.
I've always felt a romantic connection to you, so that kind of makes sense.
Connor, yes.
Yes, finally it comes out. I am pumped to talk about this game and your experience with it, 'cause it's one that I think a lot of people who were around in the N64 era really loved. So I'm excited. But Dennis, let's get into your history. What are some of your earlier memories of video games, whether it was playing them yourself or watching somebody play?
I remember being a kid, and I remember at the kitchen table, my father was working on this machine, and we didn't understand it at the time. But eventually, we realized that this was video game. My father invented the first video game. And I remember
Wow.
that was crazy.
Oh my gosh, your father is Dr. Emmett L. Brown?
Yes, but he likes to go by Mr. Video Game.
Okay, huge.
Is the
Mario,
guy who
no
invented
joke
video
though.
games Emmett Brown?
No, I was just. You said he was working with machines, so I pulled a, you know, Back to the
I was
Future
just gonna
reference.
say, I thought it
Yeah.
was gonna, what are the odds?
No, I have no idea who made the first video game.
John Video Game.
John Video Game. Mario's nickname at one point was Mr. Video.
Really?
Yeah, no bit. That's serious.
What happened to that? It just went away?
I think he just got. He didn't want to be pigeonholed, you know.
Sure.
So you're at this table.
But truly, I'm very young, but I'm old enough that the first video game system that I remember was fucking Atari.
Nice.
And as kids, we're all playing Atari and playing fucking Joust and Pitfall and fucking. Is cursing okay on this?
Cursing's okay. Yeah. We did a Pitfall episode a couple months ago. Marcus Fulmar brought on Pitfall, so you're not alone.
Love that. Joust was a big one, which I just said, but King Kong, Donkey Kong, Jesus. But then a big thing was when the original Nintendo came out and everyone was getting the original Nintendo. And I was just a little kid. We were a poor family and my parents were also like strict Catholic. And they were like, there's no way anyone in this house is getting a Nintendo. And everyone at school had a Nintendo. Everyone was playing. It was like what everyone was talking about. Just to throw it in our faces, my parents, even though they said we couldn't have it, gave my cousins a Nintendo for Christmas.
What?
Like as a gift. And it was like insane. So my dad actually did a thing. I think I was in like second grade, but he said, if you can get 3 A's on your report card, I will buy you a Nintendo.
Okay.
And I told all my teachers that I had to get straight A's to get the Nintendo. Just for the sympathy. So I got enough to get it and we got a Nintendo and that's where Nintendo started off. Later in life or later after the Nintendo, I had a really good friend who lived down the street named Kenny, he was the person who always had everything. Like he had all the newest video games. He was constantly getting the newest thing. He had every new system. He would get it. He would have it. He'd have the new game. We'd play it. We'd play the new game all night, every night. I was always there. He had the Sega Channel when the Sega Channel was a thing. Literally, it was do you know Sega Channel?
Yeah, it was like an online interface for like the Genesis, maybe.
Yeah, it was like before like internet, but it was like we saw it as like a cable channel that you just went to play video games, which was cool. But yeah, and then college, everyone's just playing games in the dorms. And then when I moved to California, I'm from the suburbs of Philadelphia. When I moved to California, the way I stayed in touch with Kenny for a long time was I had an Xbox 360 and so did he. And we used to love playing Halo.
Okay.
And we would just hop on for a couple hours and play Halo against each other. And that was like with the headphones and talking to each other, just like our way to like stay in touch.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have so many questions, and I loved because I got a lot of this preview as we were sort of, behind the scenes picking the game to discuss for today.
Sure.
I want to pull over on a couple of these and ask you a few questions. What are some Nintendo games that you really liked?
Really liked?
Yes.
God, I'm trying to remember. There are the games for Nintendo, the games I remember staying up, just addicted to, like God in heaven, the original Mega Man.
Oh yeah.
I didn't like it, but a big deal game, which is embarrassing to say, Star Fox, because you were like, oh, the graphics of Star Fox, even though if you look at it now, it's like a joke.
Well, it was such a big deal, the Super FX chip and like these sort of pseudo 3D polygons. And yeah, you're right. Now it looks like a prototype of like a video game.
Yes. I might be getting my systems confused. Mike Tyson's Punch Out was a big deal.
We covered it on the previous episode to this one. Yes.
Wait, really?
Yeah, we had a Vince Yap on to talk about Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
The huge deal, could never beat it.
Yeah.
I don't want to mix them. Once Kenny came into my life, all of a sudden I played everything that ever existed. So I'm trying to remember what was straight up Nintendo. It was a big deal when the thing you could cheat with came out. The thing you could put into your
like a Game Genie or something.
Game Genie.
Shark.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it was Game Genie. But yeah. But that's all I remember.
So you're going over to Kenny, and Kenny has like a bunch of systems, it sounds like.
He has every system there is. Kenny has it. It was like there was a time when people only had like Sega or Nintendo, and he had like the Dreamcast, and
Yeah.
he had like the Neo Geo, and he had like he had all the stuff. He always his all
Wow.
he seemed to care about was getting the latest system, the latest game.
Everyone has to have like that one friend that has everything. Just so like you know it exists, but also like you will never have it. You need that person.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We would at Kenny's house, he had like a little den where his video game system was.
Uh-huh.
We'd stay up just all night playing the newest game or playing a game. And then his father would wake up for work. And we knew if we had stayed up all night playing video games, we'd be in trouble. So as soon as you heard the dad coming down the steps, we both just like fall unconscious onto the ground, which is ridiculous because the game's still like playing,
Yes.
but we're just faking like we're asleep. And then the dad would make breakfast, leave for work, and we'd get up and be like, we gotta go to bed.
That's so funny.
How about yourself?
Oh God. How about myself with my friend?
Yeah. Do you have like a person did you have like a go-to friend who was like, we play video games all night?
I was never well, I always think of my best friend growing up, Eddie. And Eddie, but I would say we weren't really like kids who stayed up like all night. But there were definitely late nights like over at his house where we would kind of just be left to our own devices and just like play stuff or watch stuff until we got tired of it. So I have a lot of like memories of like groggy mornings sleeping on Eddie's floor on like a pillow and a
Yeah.
sleeping bag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
That stuff,
best.
it is so good. You were playing Halo with your friend as well. That was a big thing that you were talking
It
about
was
keeping in touch out
huge.
here. Um were you two doing like the adventure co-op or you play through the story together or were you playing online?
We
Like
would
multiplayer, I
never,
mean.
we would always do multiplayer. We'd never do the story. It's like every once in a while we get bored from 17 hours of just killing each other and killing people. And then we'd be like, should we do the co-op? Should we do the story? And then we do that for 10 minutes and go, let's go back. Let's go back.
That's so funny.
Uh,
And did you get that to keep in touch or you sort of had gotten one and by happenstance it was a way you kept in touch?
We had Halo was a game that me and him would play all the time when all the different Halos came out. And then I had the Xbox 360 when I came out here, but the online version and the ability to play was like a newer thing.
Hmm.
And that specifically I got just so we could keep doing it. He had
Okay.
it at his house so we could play, 5-year-old kids who would curse us out and say
Yes.
terrible things to us as they killed us with headshots. But I got it on mine just to be able to keep playing with them for a
That's
while.
cool. I've had like that's something that I kind of wish I would have done better with like I think even specifically college friends is we played a lot of I think even Halo specifically together in other games, but it was not soon after college where that was just something we never did and we flirt oftentimes with going back and like connecting on systems, but we just message each other. That's all we do
That's
nowadays.
positive and
We'll
good.
take it.
Kenny's now like an adult with children. And
No.
so, but still, when I go home to visit, there'll still be like a night where we go over and we just play video games for a
Really?
while. Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you remember the like did you do that in the last few years if you've been back?
Yes. And you're going to ask, what do we play? Well, I think that's what you're going to ask. I apologize.
Oh, hey, I hadn't even considered asking that.
It's always, here's the thing. I'm not up to I haven't played a new game in so long. So I'm
Yeah.
always like, can we pop Halo on?
Hmm.
And then he gets annoyed because he's playing all the new stuff still. And I'm like trying to remember how to control Halo. And
Yes.
he's like getting so annoyed. But eventually we get to it and it's good. It's fun.
That's great.
Also,
Um,
we'll do like throwbacks, like because he has access to everything now. We used to love, I don't know what system it was from, but we used to love Zombies Ate My Neighbors, which
yeah. It was on the Genesis and the Super Nintendo.
I think we did it on the Super Nintendo. And then forget what the game was called, but it was like you're just like little tanks trying to slowly
Oh, there's a
God,
bunch
I
of
forget the
tank
game.
games. What could that be?
But it was like real basic. And we make fun of how basic it is, but we love playing it.
Yeah, that's fun.
Oh, I do play new games. The two things I still play, I apologize. I have a whatever
A
Nintendo's
Nintendo
thing is.
Switch?
The Switch, yes.
Yes.
And I have Mario Kart and Overcooked are the two
Oh,
games I still
fun.
play.
Some good multiplayer action. Playing that with another person, huh?
Just me and my lady friend.
Ah, who will go unnamed for the duration of the episode.
She's already been named Sydney Sweeney. Delete.
The news is out. That's so good. Dennis, so you played those games. Uh, have you seen anything? I don't have many more questions for you about your history because I don't want to know.
Good.
But being someone who's not a big gamer but has dabbled throughout the years, do you ever see something, whether it be a game on a console or like a VR experience or anything like that, that intrigues you, that you're like, oh, I'd like to try that different thing?
I mean, all of them. Everything's a spectacular waste of time,
Yeah.
but in the best way possible. So yeah, anytime I'm like at a party and someone's got the new like goggles and
Oh,
you're
sure.
like, ooh, and then you're in that, you're like, oh yeah, I could lose 5 months to this. Like,
Totally.
absolutely. And anytime, I think the last time I was like caught off guard by a game and like I spent way too many hours playing, I was like, I have to stop this, was like when one of the God of Wars came out.
Oh, sure.
And I was like, I'm supposed to be writing and instead I'm playing because once you start, you
Was
don't
it the
want to
one where
stop
he's a
until you.
dad?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Gotcha.
But yeah, but no, the VR stuff is cool. All the new stuff is cool. Like, I feel like you always think like, oh, I'm past this, and then yeah, it's something cool, and you immediately you're back in. You're like, oh yeah, I could lose a lifetime to this in a great way. It's a fun
Yeah,
thing to do.
that's cool. Yeah, I was just kind of curious. I was kind of interested to hear because you strike me as someone who's curious, whether it be about, storytelling or what have you. So that's why I wanted to ask that.
What is the thing right now? What is the thing that I don't know about right now?
What don't you know? But you know what is kind of like leaking its way into that I feel like has a lot of game DNA and game design stuff is like immersive theater. Like I've never been to an immersive theater experience. Have you been to anything like that?
Yes.
And what any takeaways?
Yeah, no, it's weird. I love that shit. Like I
Yeah.
love that stuff. Like that's very cool. You feel like that is relating to do you think you've played so many video games and now you need like it's like a drug addiction where you're like, I need a bigger high. So like live interaction is like, ooh,
I think that I more sort of have seen it as like another way to have like an audience slash player interaction in a world where you can feel like your choices can kind of matter. And because it's like immersive in like a storytelling sense with actors and set dressing and all that, it's again not something I've touched, but I'm still intrigued by.
I will say a thing that I find very funny about myself, ha ha ha, is that I love when doing improv, I love using the audience. I think it's like a
Yes.
tool not a lot of people use.
Hmm.
But I hate when I'm in an audience being interacted with. So
Oh, of course.
so the interactive theater is like cool, and I like to watch it from like an overhead, like, ooh, I see what you're doing. This is really neat,
Yes.
but I hate being in it.
I think that's why I haven't done anything like that is because I'm too afraid or weirded out to like participate, and I think to do that, you would have to be ready to participate.
I really do feel like we're two people who perform quite a bit. So it's weird to say this and tell me if you disagree, but it's like you have to switch your brain into that mode. So I used to go to clown shows just to see what clowning was like.
Yeah.
And it became a thing that when they saw me, they'd always bring me on stage and use me in weird ways.
No way.
And that drove me crazy to the point where I stopped going to them because I'm like, I couldn't hide. But I
Yes.
hate that. If my brain is not in like performance mode, it feels, I just don't like it.
It sounds like yeah, when you're not ready to go and participate or be put on the spot, it's just not fun.
Just not fun.
No, not at all. Dennis, uh
Yes, Connor.
before we move on to the break, is there any game from your history or like an experience that you haven't touched on yet that you'd like to just get out before we scoot?
I just wanted to say you brought up Contra earlier,
Yeah.
and my dentist growing up had the arcade game. It was a normal kid dentist place, but he had one arcade game and it was Contra,
Really?
and you could play it for free. So I was like the one kid who loved going to the dentist, like because I just wanted to try and beat Contra.
Yes.
So
Dude,
that's it. That's all I got.
I I feel like I just missed out as a kid, or maybe still as an adult when I go to the dentist, because I have so many friends and people who have these anecdotes about these dentist office with video games in them. Like
Really?
Nick Costanza, I think, had like Donkey Kong 64 in his dentist's office and other stuff. But we need more interactive materials in those offices.
Can I tell you, there was like growing up, there was a weird, I don't know if this is a normal thing. It was weird to me. There was a Burger King that had a video game system, and it really worked in terms of like, that's the Burger King we had to go to because
Oh yes.
I wanted to play NES.
That's funny. I remember, I don't know if I ever saw a Burger King that had something like that, but McDonald's at a certain point had like Nintendo 64s in like the play area, like in the kiosk sort of. And then they eventually put
S-
GameCubes in there as well.
Smart.
Yeah. Also if you want to find the nastiest controllers in the world, go look at those things.
So I'm just thinking, I
Oh
was
man.
just
I remember the GameCube controller specifically because the sticks that you would move, the analog sticks, were rubber. They'd always have the rubber just completely torn off those things, and they'd be like these plastic, just wastelands of bacteria. Just disgusting.
that's where COVID started.
No one wants to talk about it, but it definitely is. Dennis, thank you for diving into a bit of your history with gaming.
You too. See you next
For
time.
me. Yeah, this is it. This is the end of the show. Well, let's go ahead and take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll finally get into all things Perfect Dark. So I'll see you on the other side.
Yeah. See you on the other side.
Welcome back to Call Me by Your Game. I, your host, Connor McCabe, am still here with our guest today, Dennis Curtlett. Welcome back, pal.
Hi, Connor. Nice
Ah,
to meet you.
nice to meet you too. It's an honor. Dennis, like I told you before the break, we're finally back and it's time for the main event. We're going to be getting into all things Perfect Dark, the game you brought on for today to discuss your time
Yeah.
with. Also, like I told you, I'm going to do a little housekeeping and set the table for this game. Just reading basically 3 paragraphs worth of information, uh, which
Yes.
is the most entertaining part of the show. And Dennis, if you want to jump in at any point, green light.
Awesome.
I say one word and you jump in. Without further ado, here I go. Perfect Dark is a 2000 first-person shooter video game
Yeah.
developed and published by Rare for the
Yep.
Nintendo 64. The
Sure.
first game of the Perfect Dark series. We're getting approval all over the place. The story follows Joanna Dark, an agent of the Carrington Institute Research Center, as she attempts to stop an extraterrestrial conspiracy by rival corporation Datadyne. The game features a campaign mode where the
Oh,
player must complete a series of levels to progress through the story, as well as a range of multiplayer options, including a co-op mode and traditional deathmatch settings with computer-controlled bots. A spiritual successor to Rare's 1997 first-person shooter GoldenEye 007, Perfect Dark shares many features with its predecessor and runs on an upgraded version of its game engine. GoldenEye 007 director Martin Hollis led this game's production for the first 14 months of its near 3-year development cycle before he left Rare to
wow.
pursue other interests, which back then, 3 years would have been a long time to develop a game. And now it's like kind of run of the mill. There'd probably be a
Wait,
short
how,
cycle now.
knowing nothing, and I apologize. How long does it take to make a game?
Well, it totally depends, but let's just say that would have been long back then, and now it's short. So game development has really become a much longer, more involved process, probably as the technology becomes more complicated and you can do much more with graphics and all that jazz.
Someone once explained video games to me as imagine making a movie, but the first thing you need to do is with a video game is decide how to build the camera you're going to use to shoot the movie. Like
Yeah,
that's how
yeah.
much more complicated it is.
Yeah, it really is. Not that I need to get into it too much here, but I've gotten into game development over the last year, and yeah, it's really complicated, and it's it yeah, it's like making a movie that you get to keep you're also like remaking it all the time as you're putting it together.
Are you quietly working on your own video game you're not telling anyone about yet?
Not quietly, but I am working on a game with a few friends that we started in January that we're hoping to finish by the end of summer. So hopefully the game Send in the Clown is out there at some point soon.
Ooh, Ooh, that's cool.
I'll
That's
share it with you
awesome.
for sure. It's basically a point and click adventure with just it's basically a big joke machine. So a lot of comedy. Do you like
I love
comedy?
it. Eh.
Okay, we'll see. Uh, Perfect Dark is one of the most technically advanced titles for the Nintendo 64 and required the expansion pack to access the campaign mode and most of the multiplayer features. Upon release, the game received critical acclaim and sold relatively well, eventually joining Nintendo's Player Choice game selection, which I want to say that was like if you sold, I'll click it here. Back then, it used to be like if you sold a very low amount of titles. What do they say here? Are they even going to list it? No, they don't list it. It used to be like 250,000 titles or something. Now it's like a million. Anyway, critics widely praised its graphics, AI,
And wisely.
and wisely. Good choice, y'all. A number of multiplayer options, but some criticized the inconsistent frame rate, which is often a problem on the N64. There was a Game Boy Color version of the game, which allows some gameplay options that could have been unlocked using the transfer pack, a little thing you could put on the back of your N64 controller that could house a Game Boy game. A remaster of this game was also released, titled Perfect Dark as well. Featured enhanced graphics and online multiplayer, and was released in 2010 for the Xbox 360. The game, I
Whoa.
know, can you believe it? But most
No.
recently, Dennis, this game actually just came to the Nintendo Switch on the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack. It's like the upgraded version
Really?
of Switch Online. You have to download a whole app for it. It's called the Mature 17 Plus app.
What? I can't download that app.
I
I won't
know.
be able to go back to work ever again.
Yeah. So, the game has come back. It's now on Switch Online for its expansion pack members. Yeah, but that's kind of. Did you have anything you wanted to add about the game or anything I shared, Dennis?
When you say the frame rates changed, is that the same as in what does that mean? You made it sound as if that's a common thing. Are we talking like, tell me more about what we're talking about?
Yeah, so different games. I want to, most as you're a cinephile. Most movies and shows I want to say are fixed at like a 24 frames per second
Sure.
rate. But video games, they're all over the place. Like
Is
the
that
standard,
true?
the standard kind of now is 60 frames per second, but a lot of games operate at 30. And the Nintendo 64, like games chugged. They were terrible. They would run constantly under like like at 20 frames per second. It was really choppy.
Wow. What's crazy is, yeah, frame rate's a thing that I think about all the time in terms of
Mhm.
like for film stuff,
Yeah.
but I've never once even considered it for video games or even thought about it. That's really interesting.
Yeah, some people, and it depends on the game too, because some games really rely on a specific frame rate to work for the gameplay, but some people, even when it doesn't come to the gameplay mattering for that, are really particular on the type of frame rate they like, which is usually the higher the better, because they want it to be the most realistic and the motion to be so lifelike, I guess.
Wow, cool. Never
Yeah.
even thought about that.
Do you know what
Uh,
what frame rate do we see at? Do you know?
yeah, it's well, what I was always taught was 29p is like what older documentaries are shot as, what like with the old video cameras, and that's like how we view the world is what
Okay,
I was always.
interesting.
That's probably incorrect, actually, but I just know it used to be old videos and like documentaries were 29p, 30p, and then film was 24p, which made it look different. And then they've been trying to up it with film to like 60p just to get the different kind of motion. It's better with like action stuff.
Do you remember when
I was
like
n
the Hobbit movies were running at like
Yes.
48?
Yes. And everyone was like, what are they doing?
Yes, I
Yes.
saw those in theaters and was like was tuned into that phenomenon happening, but I don't remember how I felt about it. Whether I think it felt weird to me, if I remember correctly.
What I remember is that anytime they try and change the frame rates for films, it always feels incorrect because I've just grown up watching them at 24p.
Yeah.
So even if you tell me whatever the benefit is in terms of like, oh, the action's so much smoother, or like it's better for the special effects of this, it's like I don't care. My brain is saying this is wrong.
Yes, 100%. Um, well, outside of this setting the table for Perfect Dark, Dennis, I want to get into your history with this game. How did you come to play this game?
Again, his name is Kenny Donenberger. I will
Donna
say that
Burger.
Yeah, poor kid. The I will say that as you said, GoldenEye was like an incredibly popular game. Like everyone played GoldenEye, and for years everyone played GoldenEye. It was like the shooter game, the one-on-one shooter game. Um, and I just remember that Perfect Dark was like the next big one,
Hmm.
and it was like, and it had all we cared about back then was like what are the guns? What can you do? And Perfect Dark had, whereas GoldenEye had just like standard James Bond guns, Perfect Dark had like alien guns and the normal guns. And yes, the graphics and all the stuff and the way the guns worked were so much better. Um, truly, there's three specific things I remember from Perfect Dark. Do you want the three specific things?
I would love them. These are three specific things.
These are three specific things. There are two guns that I still remember to this day. You were like, ooh, oh, four things. Okay. So the cool thing, I forget if GoldenEye had this, but the thing that Perfect Dark had was the guns could be used in like two different ways.
Okay.
So it was like a fun thing of like you could have a machine gun, but then also you could do the second mode, which is throw the machine gun and then you can shoot that gun and it blows up and it's like, ooh. Or there was like an alien machine gun that you could then use as like the two guns I always remember are there was a thing called, I believe, the sentry gun,
Hmm.
which was just like an alien machine gun or a regular machine gun. But then what you could do is take it and throw it on the wall, and then it act as if someone's sneaking up behind you. It acts as like just takes them out.
Oh, like a turret.
Yeah. So like for gameplay, what you
Oh,
do is the go-to thing that drove everyone crazy was you'd play the boards enough that you found the one where there's like a corner and you'd go into like a hallway or a corner that had no back or that had just like one way of getting you and you put the sentry gun up there to get your back and then you had the front, you could just like protect yourself.
interesting.
And then the other gun was a thing, I think we called it the rail gun. I don't know if it was a rail gun, but it was a total cheat gun. It was like an alien rifle that you could see through all the board and it would track like the other player and there was no way to run from it. So if someone got that gun, you're just like trying to run in zigzags because they can
Oh,
find you anywhere on the board and just shoot you.
so they not only could like see through walls basically, but you could shoot through walls.
Yes. So it was like a one shot kill anywhere you're at. And if you saw the person next to you using that gun, you were like, ah, shit. And you start like trying to run real fast back and forth so they couldn't lock onto you.
Yes.
And then the third thing I remember is we never played the actual like I mean every once in a while we play the actual like story version, but
Yeah.
the thing we always loved is there was an alien component where you had to like save an alien. I think
Yes.
his name was Elvis. And the thing I remember is you could shoot him in the head, even though he was on your side. So every
You
once
could
in a
just
while you
ruin the
just be
mission.
like, yeah, you just end it by killing him.
That's so
That's what I
funny.
remember.
I love that. Was this game, you said you played this at Kenny's house. This was a, Kenny Donenberger game here. Was it one that one day, and if you can't remember, that's fine. That he just had? Were you playing GoldenEye and looking forward to this game?
I remember Kenny was always like, Kenny had all the news. Kenny was like, this is coming. So
Yes.
GoldenEye was such a big game. And he was like, yeah, GoldenEye is great, but Perfect Dark's coming. And I'm like, what is Perfect Dark? I don't think it was even called Perfect Dark. But he's like, there's a sequel to GoldenEye coming.
Yeah.
And like, ooh, a next GoldenEye. And he's like, yeah, it's gonna have better graphics and better he knew all the stuff and we were really excited for it. But yes, we knew it was coming before. He knew it was coming before. GoldenEye was such a big thing, and it was a continuation in our minds of that. So it was a big deal.
Okay. Very cool. Was this something that you two would ever play with other people? Like, would you ever have four-player games with other friends, or was it just really you two playing together?
God, I'm trying to remember. Did it have a we
I think you could
Kenny
play
all
four-player, I believe.
in college, I believe GoldenEye had 4 players, so Perfect Dark had 2. But yes, it was always fun with 2, but it was even better with 4. And it
Okay.
wasn't like if I'm incorrect, I apologize. It wasn't like online. You had to get 4 people in a room and you're all playing it.
Yes.
Um, which is crazy to think about now. But it was always the thing too where somebody would get pissed because they're like, stop looking at my screen. Stop looking
Yeah.
like I'm hiding. Stop looking at my screen. People just getting mad at each other.
Of course.
But yes, Kenny was known as the video game guy. So like truly he was always we'd played all the time, but he'd always have more people come over.
Yes.
100%.
Um, this game, like I've very little experience with Perfect Dark. I remember it very well growing up, but it was like
Do you?
game. It it was like a game that my friend Eddie, his older brother, would play more than like we would. I also didn't even play that much GoldenEye, but I dabbled in them. But I remember when I got Perfect Dark like 5 years ago on the N64 on some stupid GameStop sale, and I learned online that you can set up a control scheme for one player with two controllers, where essentially you're holding like the middle prong of the N64 controller. Like
Yeah.
you would basically hold that and have like your fingers on each of the triggers and just the control stick, and that's how you'd be holding two separate controllers moving around.
I had no idea. I've never done that. That is really cool. Why? Why
I
does that exist?
I wonder if it was sort of like an early look at how first person games would function now, where you like specifically like with Halo or in just about any modern FPS, you're using two sticks to control the camera and your movement, where on the N64, you just had the one stick and like the C buttons that you were using.
I like talking about the N64 like it was like there's just this one button you kept pressing.
Yes.
It's the whole thing. It's just like a big a big block and a button and you just kept pressing it.
Yes. It's a weird, well, the N64 controller, look, I love it, but it is the weirdest, one of the strangest design choices, I think. Those like the trident looking thing where no
Yes.
one knew where to put their hands, but um specifically with like first person shooters, I'm kind of amazed all these years later that they were as popular as they were on this console because of the control scheme seems so foreign to me. Like I don't even remember if you moved with the C buttons and and controlled your vision with the stick or what. Do you remember?
I don't remember either, but I will say I remember when Xbox and Halo and having played so much GoldenEye and having played so much Perfect Dark, it was like, how many different things am I pressing here to do
Yeah.
what? Like what? Like it took so long to
Sort of
figure out.
adjust.
Yes, because we were old school, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
mean, Atari was literally truly a stick and a button.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Different times. When
Different,
you
and we'd ride our horse there, and it was
oh
great.
all the way. I always forget you're a part of that generation. Um, you know, is there like a level in this game that you remember playing the most or that sticks out to you to this day?
God, I wish I knew. I'm sorry. I truly, here's what I'll say. I don't remember the things but if you, the same with Halo, the same with GoldenEye, it's like if I sat back down to it now and turned it on, I'd be like, oh, Jesus, I'm back. Like it's
Yes.
100% I remember all the things. Um, Truly, the only things I remember were that sentry gun that you could stick on the wall and have
Uh-huh.
like a backup, and then truly the rail gun and like and that each gun had a second function, which was a big deal to
Yes.
us.
Okay. Cool. Well, that being the case, running out of sort of game specifics, I want to get into some more of this context, whatever you might remember about playing, with Kenny and and maybe, and if this game continued forward for you. I want to start though by, can you do some scene painting for me and like describe the room you would have played this at it was at Kenny's house?
Kenny's house. I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah.
this is definitely a college game too, but truly Kenny's house.
Okay.
Kenny lives in the suburbs of Philadelphia. So like a little bit roomier, a little bit more space. He's got a two-story house. He's got fun thing about, I love that I'm painting Kenny's house. He truly has big living room, big kitchen, and then all the bedrooms are upstairs. But then beyond the kitchen was its own special den. And the den was it was supposed to be built out for like, there was like piano and stuff there, like all kinds of things that people could do. But really all it was Kenny's video game lair. So basically, truly, it would always be me and him or kids, just the parents be walking around the living room and the kitchen. We're just in this den playing video games in it. Truly, it was just a room that led out to the backyard. Everything was always, all the windows and the doors were always covered. So it was always
Okay.
super dark for what was best with video games. The TV, this is back in the day when it was all like tubed televisions.
Yes.
So like big TVs, but like big wide TVs. And I think he had multiple ones back there,
Like weigh as much as a car.
weigh as much as a car. Like you're not moving these things.
Yeah.
Um, they are set. The other thing was Kenny always had multiple dogs. Later in life, he had three Great Danes. If you know Great Danes are the size
Oh,
of a horse.
yes.
And those
Can I share an
before
anecdote
the
about Great Danes really quick?
please.
I'm sorry. Uh, I had a friend growing up, a really good friend in school named Zach, and his family was really tall. Like Zach was like 7 foot.
Oh wow.
His mom was like 6'5". His dad was like the shortest person in their family, and he was still like 6'2". Um, they were all really tall, and I always thought it was funny because they had family dogs, and they always had Great Danes as well. And I was like, oh, this is perfect because it's
Yeah.
like a regular dog to you.
They need that.
Yeah, which probably was insulting to him, but anyway, you said Great Danes and I was like, I gotta share. But you were talking about the Great Danes?
So it was a family of giants.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
so, and he always had a bunch of dogs. And the dogs, so he always had a bunch of dogs, and the den was also where they put the dogs. So you'd have three dogs sleeping in the back room with you and Kenny as you're playing video games, but the whole room's just built for dogs and video games,
Yes.
basically. But it was dark and like away from the rest of the house. And like as a kid, it was a dream.
Oh, for sure.
Like, you know, you're not sharing your parents' TV. It's like you have your own space that you can just get the hell away from everybody and just play video games forever.
Yeah. That's that does sound like a dream. And any friend who had like a room remotely like that, I was like, I just want to live in this room.
I just want to live in here. I will
Yeah.
say too, again, I grew up in a big poor family who did not have any of this stuff. Kenny had a closet that was just snacks, like a snacks closet. So it was like you go over there, you're like, what do I want to eat today? And it's like you're popping out Pop-Tarts and like Cheetos and like playing video games in the back.
Yes.
A distinct memory I always remember is Kenny would always make the super sugary, make it yourself iced tea that just
Okay.
tastes like pure sugar.
Uh-huh.
And then we had a big tub of the thicker pretzels, that big like
Oh yeah.
and then just all night you're drinking the iced tea and doing the salted pretzels. And like I recently, I don't know if you've done this recently, but recently I tried to drink a little bit of that iced tea and like do a little bit of those pretzels, and it
Uh-huh.
like I feel sick like immediately, almost like it's like too much sugar, too much salt, too much
Yes.
gluten. And back then it would be like a night of that,
Yeah,
a night of
totally.
just like knocking it down
You would just eat it until it was gone, basically.
till it was gone.
And
And you go, no more.
just a stomach of iron as kids. Like my family is funny. You're talking about this phenomenon of the food closet. I think people call it a pantry. But
Sure.
you're like, I'll take your word for it. I, my family wasn't poor. So jokes on you, Dennis.
Okay.
Yeah, brag. But I did have a couple of friends.
What?
Yeah, I had a couple of friends miraculously, one being
That's
Eddie
great.
and my other friend Nick, where their houses were bigger than ours and they also had more stuff than us usually. And so I remember like Nick's pantry specifically, and it was like the same thing. It was like heaven in there. It was like they had stuff like they just had Pop-Tarts lying around, any snack you wanted.
Any
Like
snack you wanted.
this is the first place I ever had have you ever had a guacamole chip? Like
Oh,
a chip that's
yes.
guacamole flavored?
Yes.
You know what that stuff is good with? Is good with like nacho cheese.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And they had that too.
Yeah. Of course. But gosh, you're just like jogging, anytime these sort of like sleepover, like I don't know if you guys are best friends, but like close friend staycation stuff comes up. Like I have such vivid memories of a couple places I would stay. So it always like really tickles me hearing about somebody else's.
Can I tell you, and this is not good content, this is just two people remembering things that people are like, we don't care.
You can.
So I'm one of nine kids.
Yes.
There's 11 of us in a tiny house. There's no space. We're always just fighting each other. So as a kid, you're just trying to find anywhere else to go. So for the first like 10 years of my life, my best friend was this guy named Sean Gallagher who lived up the road, and I would go there on my bike every day, and I'd stay there every night of the summer. And I remember truly I'd stay there like 6 days in a row, and then his mom would be like, we're like little kids, but like 6 days in a row, and then his mom would be like, don't you want to go home and take a shower? And I'd be like, no, I'm good. But then what happened was Sean moved to Delaware, which was only
Oh,
like 2 miles away, but to a kid, 2 miles, you're gone. Like you no longer up the street. I can't get to you. You're gone.
Mm-hmm.
So the day after Sean Gallagher left, he had next door was it was like the bad kid in the neighborhood, but was also the same age. And that kid was Kenny. So the day after Sean left, I went up to Kenny's house and I said, "Do you want to hang out?"
Uh-huh.
And that's how we became
No
best
way.
friends.
Are you telling me that you fixed Kenny?
I would say, or maybe I became the bad kid too.
Yeah.
But I will say it was me and Sean. Then Sean moved, and I just went next door.
Like, who's next? That's so funny.
And that was Kenny.
Gosh, I'm imagining you two in one of your Superman outfits right during
Hell
this time.
yeah.
Um this is I'm really enjoying just going back with you here. Do you have any like specific memories of times you played this game, whether it was like, oh, a thing that you did in the game or like an event that happened while you two were hanging out? Or is it more broad for you?
It's more broad because it
Yeah.
feels like this was definitely there were games that we played like a couple of times and stopped. But Perfect Dark was like in my memory like a whole summer. So it was like
Yeah.
in your system of like we tried the other stuff and go back to want to do Perfect Dark. We go back to Perfect Dark. Um, it was I don't know if you had this, but it was like yeah, it was the comfort one. Halo became that, but it was like the we'll try this, but really let's make sure we get a couple hours of Perfect Dark in.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're a good go-to for sure. Um, you mentioned that you also played this a bit in college. Do you want to touch on that at all?
Sure. So if you're 1,000 years old,
The first
so
college, right?
the first college,
That's so
what
crazy
did
that
they
your
say?
dad is Mr. Video Game and you went to the first college.
Listen, I was very lucky growing up. Um, the freshman year of college, not to super date, but GoldenEye was the thing. GoldenEye was and all of a sudden you got a whole giant dorm room of everyone just meeting up in the one dorm room of the one guy who had GoldenEye. And then you got four people just waiting to be like, I got next, I got next, I got next, I got next. So I remember GoldenEye was huge freshman year of college. And later, later when you're older, Perfect Dark took over. And it like later in college, you don't do as much of the dorm room playing, but it was you always had a system and a thing you played. So later in college, it was absolutely Perfect Dark. And whenever Kenny would come visit, it'd be like, ooh, the thing that we could easily before we go out and get fucked up, it's like let's do Perfect Dark. Or we come home fucked up, it's like let's do Perfect Dark.
Yeah.
It is crazy to think too, like without the online stuff, how you had to go somewhere and do that, and
Yes.
like you were excited to have a second person so you could do the one-on-one
Totally.
versus like, oh fuck, I got to do this stupid story version. It's like, no,
Yes.
I just want to kill someone who's like a human.
Yeah, yeah, that's most of my motivation in life, as it turns out.
I just remember like I don't know if this is still the case. I don't know how much is dating me, but like if you played the first person shooter version, but against like the computer, I don't know if you could do that, but it was like they were just not good and dumb and it was like too easy. But playing a
Yeah.
person was fun because you had to like really strategize and really play.
Yeah, I think that's been a kind of a constant thing in games is like the computer's artificial intelligence and like how does it feel like it's competitive and fun? Is it unfair? Like how's the feel? And so maybe it got a lot better. That was something that, at least from the Wikipedia excerpts that I pulled that like they seem to that had improved from GoldenEye to Perfect Dark, but it's still not like playing against a person.
I mean, GoldenEye, if I remember, was just like the
Yeah.
guys are like running against walls and you're shooting them. Like it was
Yes.
like you were
Just
just having fun
executing.
seeing just like, you're just executing people and be like,
God.
wee.
Yeah. Did
But
you say
yeah,
that? Wait, did you and Kenny go to college together?
we did not. We grew up together and then I went like 6 hours away, but he would come visit. I would go visit
Okay,
his.
cool. Gotcha. What school did you go to?
I went to the University of Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh
Oh, I always
or Pitt.
I was gonna say I don't know. I was about to say that I forgot that, but I don't know if I knew that you went to Pitt. But now I'm just gonna
Or
internalize
ever
that
went to
forever.
college at all. I grew up in Philadelphia and went to Pitt, which is the other part of the state, the other side of the state. So
Hmm.
it's like 6 hours away. And in my brain, that was like as far as you could go in the
Yeah.
world. Where did you go to college?
I went to Azusa Pacific, which is down here. You probably see billboards for it every so often.
All the all the time.
Oh yeah, there is one on Rowena right now that it was gone and they brought it back and I'm like that damn thing just staring me in the face.
Have you ever lived on the East Coast?
No.
Well, you're not missing much, but nice to get that exposure at some point. You've been to New York a bunch of times. You've been to the East Coast a bunch.
Yeah, a few times. I love the East Coast, dude. I love New York. I really enjoyed Boston and Philly, actually. I went to Philly after DCM
Don't.
2018, and it truly had like a revival, emotionally revival weekend.
That's very sweet. I would say I don't miss the weather. I don't miss the like LA to me is great. I
Yes,
prefer this very much.
there's a reason you've been here for an unnamed amount of years.
6 months.
Wow, it's really flown by. Can't believe it was that
Yeah.
long ago we were at Sydney Sweeney's birthday. Dennis, um, are there any details, whether it be about the game itself or your experience playing it, that you haven't mentioned yet that you'd like to?
No, I'm sorry. Again,
That's
I should have
okay.
saved some. I apologize for just unloading all of them. But truly, you could just shoot the guy in the head. Um,
So,
I
so
think
you
it was
know,
like, could
to
you hold two guns? I don't remember. Sorry, keep going.
you
I don't
might
think
be
you
able
could.
to.
Maybe.
You're fine. So, in that being the case, if there's nothing extra you want to bring up, can you sort of just put a nice bow on whatever place this game held for you?
Perfect Dark was that sweet time before you realize you're absolutely an adult, but you have not realized it yet. So you're staying up super late with your best friend playing a video game, but you're like 22. You're like between 20 and 22. So like when you're a kid playing video games, you're talking about, I don't know if you were this way, but you're talking about like the girl you have a crush on and like what movies you're going to see. But as like an adult, you're talking about like real life stuff like first jobs out of college
Yeah.
and like where are you going to move, but you're still playing this video game not realizing like you've already crossed over to the other side. That's
Hmm.
how I'll always think of Perfect Dark as the game that was the oh, I didn't realize we are adults yet.
Yeah, you blinked and you were. Uh, well, that's great. Well, Dennis, thank you so much for bringing on Perfect Dark and just telling me about your experience. That was great.
Let's play. This is the part where we now
Yay!
play it.
Actually, the first like 15 episodes or so of the podcast, I would play the game for a half hour with my guest and then record. So that was helpful to like jog memories and stuff. So we're gonna do it in the reverse order where the next time you come over in like 9 months, I'll be like, "Hey, Dennis, I've got that," and we'll be like, "Oh no, let's just go socialize with everybody." Yeah.
Wouldn't it be funny if there was a podcast where it's two people playing these games, but it was like kind of off to the side and you just kind of heard them being like, oh, oh, that's fun. Oh, ooh, got me. And you're like, what am I listening to?
It's just the most boring thing you've ever watched. Um, well, Dennis, on the
Twi-
way out today.
Twitch, Twitch without the visuals.
Oh yeah, and just like they're kind of in a corner and not really saying anything coherent. Dennis, on the way out, I do have a couple of post-show segments prepared for you. Uh, the
Yeah.
first of which is the Fact Me by Your Game segment, and that's just I'm going to share some fun facts about Perfect Dark with you, the guest.
Yes.
So I have sourced both of these facts today from the YouTube channel Did You Know Gaming, which has a great video about Perfect Dark. If you want to look it up, you'll probably learn some stuff you didn't know before, including
Let me write that down.
these two things right here. I should have linked it to for you anyway. Oh, perfect. You're writing. Didn't know you could hold a pen like that. So the first of which, Dennis, I have titled Joanna Dark Inspiration. Now, when designing Joanna Dark, the team took inspiration from several sources. Probably could have guessed that. This includes Ghost in the Shell and the X-Files for the setting and game context, and a little bit of the main character. And also, I guess Joan of Arc had an influence on Joanna Dark. It could have just
Wow.
been that the names sound kind of similar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Um, Casting for the character's voice acting was difficult. Nintendo originally implored Rare to hire an American voice actress. Rare famously was a British development studio in the UK.
Oh.
And I guess after a bunch of failed auditions, the game's composer named Eveline Novakovic was given the role. So the person who composed the music for this game also did Joanna's voice.
Is that why that character is always talking about composing music?
Yes. I hate violinists. Pew pew.
Pew pew.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's the first one. And the second one, I have it's a cut Game Boy camera feature. Now, when originally developing Perfect Dark, The game was planned to have a feature that would allow players to map real life faces onto characters in the game.
Weird.
Yes. So the feature was called Perfect Head. So there's like a joke there that I just truly it's exactly what it was called. And proposed to use the Game Boy camera feature. Do you know the Game Boy camera, Dennis? I've actually got a visual right here.
Give me the visual.
So the Game Boy camera was essentially a Game Boy like cartridge that you could put in the back of a Game Boy.
I do know this. Kenny had this.
Of course, Kenny did. Kenny. For the viewers at home, you can see I've got well, you can see Dennis's reflection there. That's cool. It's kind of like two Dennises. Yeah, suddenly he turned into a ghost. But the Game Boy camera was like a really shitty camera feature for the Game Boy. So theoretically, what they were developing was a way to you would take a picture of a person's face using the Game Boy camera, plug that into the N64 with the transfer pack, which is a device that goes in the back of those controllers. And the feature was scrapped. Rare's official explanation was that using these custom heads caused the game to crash, but it was later revealed that it was actually the team decided that simulating killing anyone you wanted was probably not a good idea.
Yeah, just from the start of this, of all the games to do this for, no.
Yeah, maybe like mapping a face onto like an NFL player to put yourself in the game, but like,
yeah, fun.
yeah, I think this is also, this is around the time where like gun violence and mass shootings were actually like taken seriously, and were like there was like a blip on the radar in at least in this country. When that stuff would happen. But anyway, that's the Fact Me By Your Game segment. Dennis, I'll lead you into. Go ahead.
Don't ask me this back, but what year were you born?
1990.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I know yours because do you remember? I'm not going to say it. I won't say it on the pod, but there was a brief time where, remember, right when the Clubhouse came back, maybe in 2021, where people had to show their vaccine cards to get in, and I think on your vaccine card it had your birthday, and I looked up at you and I said, "I just saw your birthday," and then I think you just went into the theater.
That sounds right.
Yeah,
I will say I'm proud of my age. That being said, the thing that always blows my mind, and again, please delete this, or hopefully he doesn't listen, but I'm older than Johnny Schwartzbein. We have the same birthday, but I'm older than him.
That still blows my mind, and I know that fact. Yeah, no one would.
Johnny Schwartzbein was
Sorry,
on Busters.
Johnny.
Was on Busters with us.
Yes.
And we have the same. We're both June 1st babies, but I am the elder statesman of the two of us.
Yeah, and he treats you like his little brother. So, and everyone really, but
I look up to him.
Yeah, goodness. Dennis, I've got one more segment for you. I'll lead you into the game recommendation segment. Now, I want you to know this I sort of treat as my one forced tie into the movie Call Me By Your Name, where I'm going to treat Perfect Dark as your passionate summer fling in Italy that's not going to work out. And so in order to help you get over this devastating heartbreak, I've got 3 recommendations that all have something in common with your game to help you get back on the saddle. What do you think?
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome. So the first of which today is if you just like shooters of the era, Nintendo 64 shooters, and you want something a little weird, I'll recommend a game that I didn't know about until the other day. It's called Forsaken. Now, this game isn't sort of like GoldenEye and Perfect Dark where you're running around, like as a person shooting in hallways and stuff. You're kind of in this little ship that flies around these little zones, and it doesn't look particularly good, but that's a recommendation for you.
It's a sparkling recommendation. You really sold me on it.
Great. I thought I would. The next one is if you want you love the N64 first-person shooters, but you want something from the next generation with some inspiration from these Perfect Dark developers. Well, I think it was Martin Hollis, the game's developer, the director. When he left, he split off to do the Time Splitters series. Have you ever played Time Splitters?
I know the name Time Splitters. What is that? That's got to be.
It's another first-person shooter with some more with sci-fi elements. Not like the ones in Perfect Dark, but different.
Okay, I know that name. I feel like I have played this,
It
but
was on like
ooh,
the
interesting.
Thank you. It was on the Xbox and GameCube, maybe even the PS2. Now, lastly, Dennis, you mentioned earlier that there's a character in this game called Elvis, this little, very much like a classic, big-headed gray alien guy.
Sure.
Now, if from this game the only thing that you like is you like Elvis, you love this little alien freak, and you'd actually rather play a game where you get to be an alien, I'll recommend a game called Oddworld Abe's Odyssey. Have you heard of this game?
No.
You play as a freaky little alien who is enslaved, and you have to break out and save your fellow aliens from this like evil corporation. It's kind of a what they would consider a cinematic platformer where you're just moving left to right and solving puzzles and avoiding, like security and stuff like that.
What is it on? Is it on like computer or is it on like a system?
Originally came out on the PlayStation 1, I believe, but it's on all sorts of stuff at this point.
It was so weird. Do you remember when we'd all call it the PlayStation 1 because we knew there was more coming?
Just it's just so clairvoyant in that way.
We're like, hey, did
Yes.
you get the new PlayStation 1?
Yeah.
Um,
Dennis, I'll go ahead and wrap up the game recommendations for you. We've got Forsaken, Time Splitters, and Oddworld Abe's Odyssey. That'll do it for the Rex, and that'll actually bring us to the end of the show. So before we go today and plug whatever we want, including stuff we've already kind of promoted earlier, Dennis, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. This is such a good time and just a nice excuse to hang out with you.
I was going to say, we're at the point, I don't know if we're at the point, but I feel like the majority of the time that I interact with my friends now is going on their podcasts, which is nice. It's nice to catch up, even if we do it in this way. This has been really great. Thanks for having me. Very nice talking to you again. I have questions about your life that I won't ask you on the pod that I'm interested in, but I hope everything's good.
Thank you. I'll leave you with a mysterious maybe. Dennis, on your way out, I know we plugged some stuff earlier. What do you want the listeners to know about? Where can people find you?
Okay, you can find me on Beechwood.
Still.
But a different part of Beechwood. But so I'm still on Beechwood. So if you Franklin Beechwood area and you start walking up, you'll probably run into me. So that's where you can find me.
Perfect. All right. Well, that's it for Dennis. I'll go ahead and close this out with some plugs of my own. The cover art for Call Me By Your Game is done by Glenn J. You can find him and his other great work on Instagram at Glenn with 2 N's.JAY.
It's really good.
Oh, it's just beautiful stuff.
Just fucked up your promotion.
No, please interject all like 8 of these things I'm about to do. That'll help the process. You can also follow the show all over social media on Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, and TikTok, which you don't have.
Don't. What is Blue Sky?
Blue Sky is like a Twitter alternative that started a little over a year ago that it really hasn't taken off, but I do have accounts over there just in case.
Twitter is such a shithole right now. Sorry, keep going.
You're absolutely right. It's sort of hedging our bets. But you can follow, the show all over social media and all those places. If you're listening on a podcast catcher like iTunes or Apple Podcasts, even Spotify, thanks. You can leave us a rating and review to help more people find us. If you'd rather see this in video format and see our really handsome faces, you can watch that on YouTube every episode.
Is this going to be on YouTube?
It's going to be on YouTube. YouTube.
That's great.
Hey, Dennis, I know this is going to make you feel so bad, but I'll mention it anyway. That's like the last detail on that little sort of email that I sent you earlier.
Perfect.
So it's only going to make you beat yourself up more. So we got that. You can. This show is also produced, edited, and the original music up top is by Jeremy Schmidt. If you're a listener out there, I know, can you believe that? We do all this crap together.
Is he going back to school for film? Is that what I heard?
He's at least flirting with it. I don't know if he's like actually made the jump yet, but he's talking about it.
Is that too much sharing? Jeremy, hello.
Hi, Jer. So Jeremy, he edits this, produces it, and did the original music to open the show. He's
made
also
great
got a
shorts
podcast.
too.
Great shorts. You should
Connor's also made great shorts.
Hey, and we're wearing great shorts.
And we're wearing great shorts.
You can check out his podcast, Video Games, a Comedy Show, wherever you get yours as a nice thank you for the work he puts into this podcast. You can follow me all over social media as well. I've got links in the show notes. So yeah, Dennis will finally give me that follow back. And lastly is that if you like the show and the conversations I have with people about video games, you've got to check out our Patreon. We're over at patreon.com/super NPC Radio, where we've got a ton of bonus video game content waiting for you. I already mentioned our games club, which we do every quarter. We're about to start going through Hollow Knight in a week-by-week format, kind of like a book club. But also, I do a bonus episode of this podcast every month of the co-op series, where I sit down with a group of people to discuss one game, more of an overview style, sort of a deep dive in a way, about one game at a time. We just did one on Yoshi's Island, Super Mario World 2, which is, it's on our Patreon at the $10 tier. The audio format's exclusive there, but the YouTube version's out for free. So check out our YouTube channel if you want to watch that, because I want people to watch it even if they, can't support there. But again, ton of bonus stuff on Patreon. Check it out in the link below.
You don't have to answer this.
Yes.
What are you pulling down on Patreon?
$2,000 a minute.
Yeah. Don't.
Like, since we started doing this podcast, Dennis, I think that would mean that we've earned like probably $120K.
Is it true? Is that a joke?
It's a total joke.
Here's the thing, though. It could be true.
It could.
No one knows how anything works.
You know what? No one has access to our numbers and can go read that anytime they want on our Patreon page.
To end it as oh yeah, that's right. Is there any podcast that you listen to that you look at their Patreon page and go, sweet Jesus,
yes,
these people are rich?
Yeah, there's like a one video game podcast that they have like 4,500 paid subscribers per month. Those are different tiers, but like that's not even like some of the crazier ones. I want to say like Doughboys do really well. I could look it up later.
I was going to say, not to out anybody, but Blank Check's Patreon, I look at it and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's one. That's the one that I was forgetting to name. Well, Dennis, that'll go ahead and do it. I'll close this out. This has been
Jeremy. Cut all this, Jeremy.
Yeah, Jeremy. Every moment Dennis has piped up during me trying to close this episode, just edit all of him out and my responses to him. But that'll do it for another episode of Call Me by Your Game. We will see you on the next one.